Aloha, everybody, and welcome to the Jason Jones Show. I am your host, Jason Jones, broadcasting from the beautiful hill country of Texas. I have the greatest guest for us today. I've been wanting to have her on for a very long time. Our guest is the host of Forward Boldly, Christine Niles. She's an attorney, an investigative journalist, as well as, of course, the host of her wonderful show. She is the founder of Stella Maris Media. Now, she was born in Saigon, Vietnam, 1 year before the city fell to the communists. Christina and her family relocated to France and eventually the United States. She holds a bachelor's degree in philosophy, a master's in theology from Oxford, and her JD from Notre Dame Law School. Christine began her career in 2012 when she launched Forward Boldly Radio Network. She then spent a decade as a senior producer, reporter, and investigative journalist. And she's brave. She is very brave. She is probably among the earliest voices within 2 weeks of the war that began. She spoke out on behalf of the Christians in Gaza who were under direct attack. So she is someone that I have greatly admired, and I love her show. And believe it or not, I want you people to consume a lot of media, most especially the Jason Jones Show, the Jason Jones Substack, my movies. But personally myself, I mean, I do watch a lot of movies, but I don't consume a lot of media, but I never miss Forward Boldly. So that's why I'm grateful to have her on the show. Let's get on with the interview. But before we do, this episode is being brought to you by the Vulnerable People Project, standing in solidarity with the most vulnerable people in the world when the world has walked away. From the Christian community in Gaza to the Yazidis in Iraq to the Christians in the Nuba Mountains of Sudan that have fled war, to advocating for the dignity of the child in the womb here and abroad. That's what we do at VPP. Go to our website, vulnerablepeopleproject.com. Look at what we do. And if you are not inspired, then don't give us anything. But if you are inspired, become a monthly donor. It is our monthly donors that give me the courage to grow all of our programs. And the truth is, VPP wades into a sea of human suffering. And to quote Mother Teresa, we just fill up our bucket. We want a bigger bucket. And so monthly donors allow us to grow our bucket. So that's what we do. Now on with my interview with the great Christine Niles, host of Forward Boldly on the Jason Jones Show. Christine Niles, welcome to the Jason Jones Show.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you for having me.
Okay, I have a confession. You might not like your company, but I only listen to 3 podcasts.
It's fine.
Only 3. I don't watch cable news since cable news came out. I don't watch. I watched it like 99 to 2001. Then I was over it. I don't listen to talk radio. And there are 3 podcasts I listen to. 3 shows on YouTube I listen to. Yours, Tim Dillon, don't hate, and Candace Owens. And I listen to Tim Dillon because after every Tim Dillon show, my sister calls me and wants to talk about it. And after every Candace Owens show, my daughter in Japan WhatsApps me and wants to talk about it. And I love your show. So I'm a fan.
Well, that's high praise coming from you, Jason. Thank you. Because I so respect the work that you do in the Vulnerable People Project. And I'm a monthly donor after I interviewed you. I became a monthly donor because of the Babies in Gaza campaign, the baby formula. And I just wanted to make sure I helped with that. But thank you.
Well, that means a lot because you have full vision of so many great apostolates, and you can't give to all of the great apostolates that you see. And so that you choose us as to be one of them, it means a lot to me. Now, I also owe you an apology. Yesterday was my 20th anniversary. And somehow, by accident, I got drunk. Like, I don't get drunk. I don't drink that much. And my wife and I and Ritha, my office manager, we were kind of working and drinking and celebrating our 20th anniversary. And then I woke up this morning. I said, "Oh no!"
Of your VPP?
Of my marriage, yeah.
Oh,
No,
okay.
of my
Congratulations.
marriage. No, we're having a real celebration this weekend. My wife and I are going on a trip. I don't want you to think a working dinner was how we're going to celebrate our 20th anniversary. But we exchanged gifts, and my Ritha came and joined us for family dinner, and then we were just drinking. And I woke up and I said, "I'm going to have to interview my hero hungover. This is awful," But It would be worse if this were a Baptist podcast. It's a I'm Catholic, you're
You
Catholic.
seem
It's
pretty
probably not.
lucid. So
Well, it's because I'm drinking coffee. Oh, and it's
it's fine.
interesting enough. Last night, my wife lured me into watching Dancing with the Stars for the first time because I'm the biggest Prince fan of all time. And you can even see I have a Prince coffee cup. How cool is that? And it was
That's
Prince night on
hilarious.
Dancing with the Stars. So the first time in 20 years of marriage. And I think Dancing with the Stars started the year we were married, and she's watched it ever since. But it was the first time I joined her in that. So, but that's a strange way to start the show. Christian,
The screen
here's
froze for
the
a
main
moment, so I'm
reason I
not sure
wanted to have
I
you on the
caught
show is, and we can
what you
get to that
said.
because I want to talk about your background. The main reason I wanted to have you on the show is I run an apostolate that advocates for the vulnerable. And oftentimes I find that the hierarchy or other prominent lay Catholics are obstacles to defending the vulnerable by confusing Catholic social teaching or through scandal. And I want to often address it, but I usually don't because I'm really uncomfortable with how do I want to address scandal or how does one address heterodoxy in the hierarchy of the church in a way that is consistent with being a faithful Catholic. And I think you're someone who does that very well. And,
Thank you.
maybe I've criticized in writing Bishop Barron 2 or 3 times in 10 years, Father Martin 2 or 3 times. Recently wrote something kind of chastising Matt Fradd, and I'm a fellow Catholic layman, and I always feel uncomfortable doing that. But sometimes when they step directly on my advocacy for the vulnerable, I feel that I have a responsibility to do that. So maybe that'll just be the first question. Then I really want to get into your background and why you do what you do. But this must be something you have thought about a lot. And can you help me understand how to do that? How we as Catholics can do that?
Yes, and that's a great question. It is definitely a question I've thought a lot about over the last at least 12 years, if not more. Before I started Stella Maris Media, which I started in 2023, as you know, and as many know, I worked at St. Michael's Media, also known as Church Militant, and I was there for almost 10 years. And, Church Militant was known to be a bit of a flamethrower, a lot of coverage of bishop scandals, things like that. And I focused more on investigative journalism, exposing sex abuse, because I was more of a victim's advocate. And so I focused more on that. But we did a lot of that. And I think I did struggle a lot and prayed a lot about how best to approach this because I take very seriously my Catholic faith, obedience to the magisterium, and also respect for the people that God has put in charge over us, our shepherds. And always keeping in mind the supernatural perspective above everything, not having a worldly perspective, but supernatural perspective, and being able to separate, for instance, the sinful man from the actual sacred office, which Christ himself has established and which can never be eradicated, no matter how sinful the man is who occupies it, and how the graces of that office are vested in the person who occupies that office, regardless of how sinful he is, and that Christ can still teach through that person and give us truth through that individual, whether he be the Pope or bishops or whoever. And so much of the time I was following the lead of my former boss, the head of Church Militant, but I wasn't always comfortable with the way that things were being expressed. And so I tried to be a lot more
But you want to
balanced,
see,
tried to be more
Christian,
professional.
but even there, there was a difference between your reporting and your former boss, right? I mean, I always saw that.
Yes. Yeah, because I didn't always feel comfortable with the way things were expressed. And it's interesting, I had a lot of time to think about and pray about it. And after just 10 years of my head in this kind of swamp, of exposing abuse and scandals and things like that, when I launched Stella Maris Media, which is my media nonprofit, my motto, basically the motto is bringing hope to a world in need. Because I realized after a lot of this reporting that I did that it doesn't always move the needle. Is media exposure important? Absolutely. You have to have exposure of scandals. You have to, the best disinfectant is sunlight, as they say. And I did see some good change, some positive change after some of my reporting, where bishops would act to, even if it was from embarrassment from being exposed, they would have to act and do the right thing and make changes in their diocese to protect victims or whatever. But I also saw that a lot of the reporting also fell on deaf ears, and sometimes it just didn't change very much. And it was very frustrating. And so I decided with Stella Maris Media, I wanted to focus. I still am doing some investigative work on the side because I still think it's important to expose some of the bad things happening, simply to protect, victims. But my focus is more on bringing hope to a world in need, because the world desperately needs it. We live in a very dark, confused, lost world. And I try to remember when I was growing up without the faith and without the sacraments, and how lost I was, how confused, how much pain and suffering I experienced, and confusion. I didn't know where to seek the truth. And so those are the people that I'm trying to reach out to. And so my organization is not simply focused on Catholics. It's much bigger than that. I have lots of non-Catholics who watch my show, lots of Protestants, even some atheists, and they like my content. Even if they don't agree with everything I say, they know where I'm coming from. They know that where my heart is. And so when you asked a question about scandal, how do we approach scandal in the church? I don't think that I approached it perfectly when I was working at Church Militant. I think we did a lot of things wrong. We did, a lot of things right. We also did a lot of things wrong. And so I think very seriously about, if I am going to expose some scandal or something like that, I always try to be respectful in the way that I talk about it. I never want to descend into simply trashing and bashing. I don't think that's helpful. And quite frankly, I think it's sinful. I do. I think this is not me being moralistic or anything like that, but I do take very seriously when Scripture says that every single word uttered from our mouths, we'll have to give an account for literally every single word that we utter. That's a
And how
terrifying
scary for
thought.
those of us who have podcasts
I
and
know.
shows.
Absolutely.
I
Yeah.
want to address like the Church Militant thing, because again, I never really watched it that much. I would tune in here and there. But I look at it this way: the laity was really abused. And if parents are really neglectful or allow their children to suffer abuse, and when they grow up and they become angry and they don't respond to their parents in a loving and respectful way, I think the parents have to have charity and to let their children express their grievances. And I look at when the abuses since Vatican II in the Church of the United States and in other countries as well, the way the laity has suffered when media groups were created and laity's got these microphones. I see them as just children who are angry at their parents. And so I think the hierarchy needs to be very gentle with the laity and understanding as we're learning to. Now, I was a convert. I came in the church in 2003. So I'm like the child that came into the family when the family was starting to get its act more or less together. So I'm like, what are you so mad at mom and dad for? I don't understand. Like, oh, you should have been here before. The house wasn't always like this. Does that make sense? But I do feel now, I hope we're trying to figure it out. There are a lot of popular shows that are stopped. I look at their numbers cratering because they're using the same beating the dead horse. And I do think they cause more harm than good, because I've seen this arc where people get into their faith through some of these shows, and they get really into their faith, and then they leave the church. They'll become Orthodox, or they'll become sedevacantists. It's like this strange curve. I don't know if you notice that as well. And their children most definitely do. I see their children just bolting for the door of the church.
Yeah. No, I 100%. I totally see that. I don't want to name any names, but there are definitely certain Catholic media organizations that spend a lot of time focusing only on the negative, reporting only on the worst aspects, perhaps of this pontificate or of the bishops, without balancing it. And therefore, some of these outfits, I think, are unreliable. They're not accurate. People aren't getting the full truth from them. Some of them are very popular. I mean, I'll read through some of these articles and I'll be like, okay, yes, the Pope did this and this and this, and yes, that's troubling, but they also did this and this and this, and you're completely leaving that out. And that's not honest. That's not honest reporting. And so I try to distinguish the reporting that I do by providing balance, just being fair, being objective,
We
not
can't
going out there
always be
with a particular
sensational, right?
agenda.
We can't always. The sensationalism is a quick and easy way to get clicks. Sadly, my
Absolutely.
Matt Fradd Substack has been the most read of all my Substacks. And
The
I've
which one?
written on where I challenged Matt Fradd for going to
I'm
Daily
glad that you
Wire.
did. I'm glad you did.
But it's sad to me that that's the most read of my Substacks, not me writing on the persecution of the church in India or in Africa or in the West Bank or in Gaza. But it's challenging a guy with, to be honest, in the much bigger than my platform, but not a very big platform. I don't have people in my life that talk to me about him. And I'm a very devout Catholic, and I don't hear people say, "Did you hear what Matt Fradd said?" I don't.
Right.
But he has a fairly large platform, but it's not that big. And I respond to him going to Daily Wire, and that's the most read one. And I could see how if I was driven by clicks, oh, I need to start attacking bishops. I need to start attacking this priest and that priest. And wow, I can grow a really big platform because when I'm writing on the persecution of Catholics in the West Bank, not so many clicks.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that's totally true. I think I could have gained twice the following that I have right now if I had just taken that arc, just taken the easy route, bash the Pope, bash the bishops, all that stuff. I would have gotten so many more donations and subscriptions and viewers and all that stuff. But I'm sorry, that doesn't sit well with my conscience. And I'm not going to do that. I have definitely spoken about things that have gotten people very angry with me. People have canceled subscriptions, whether it's, you know, defending the Pope in this area or whatever, defending a bishop on
I'm
an
sure I'm
unpopular
sure I
topic.
got you. I'm sure having me on got you a few canceled subscriptions. For that, I'm apologize.
Some people got mad, but it's been made up by other people who've, started following me. So yeah. Yeah, that's another thing was the Israel Gaza thing. That's well, what's interesting too is that we also have to fight the algorithm now. If you've noticed that, I don't know if you've noticed that, but there's a new algorithm on X. I think they're applying on Facebook and YouTube, where if you start mentioning Gaza or Israel in a critical light, they will start suppressing your content. I noticed it was like a huge difference. It was like a 45% drop in viewership on YouTube after I started talking about this stuff. I don't know if you saw this, but a few months ago, X released, tweeted that they were launching a new algorithm to combat, quote, terrorism. And that new algorithm was the input, they were getting input from the ADL, the Anti Defamation League. So to combat terrorism, you know what that means. I mean, anybody who supports basic human rights or dignity for Palestinians, not terrorists, okay, not violence, nothing, but just basic human rights. Anyone who says, hey, maybe we shouldn't be killing and slaughtering tens of thousands of civilians, um, terrorists, and so you start, I've seen it myself. I'm seeing all this pro-Israel propaganda being pushed on my feed, including from people I have blocked, and yet I'm seeing them over and over and over again. And it's just it drives me nuts.
You're
But that's
right.
what we have to
All these
fight now.
people I block, they live in my feed. It's unbelievable. I'm like, how many times? How do I not block these people? But it's
Yeah.
just not working. And this is the thing. Your strategy, I think, it's great for long-term growth. It's wholesome. You're going to build a good audience. At VPP, when I began advocating for the Palestinians within 2 weeks, when the first bomb was dropped on our church, I began taking hits. And the first year was devastating in donor loss. But again, I've more than made it up. And I feel my donors and supporters understand more the mission of VPP. They're getting a greater understanding of Catholic social teaching. I see the Intervenor relief work. It's just an exemplification of Catholic social teaching. And so in the long run, despite all this propaganda, despite all the algorithms, I just had a major studio reach out to me and they want to do a TV show with me. And they're like,
Wow.
how come um, your X and Instagram and everything is so small? Like, we love your content. We love your writing. We love your little videos. And I said, well, people say it's the algorithm. I think I'm just not that interesting and not that popular and talented. Who knows? They're like, no, we can do something with you here. And I don't know, but regardless, it's as if we have the world against us and we're winning. And it's sad. We're winning this war in Gaza the same way we won the pro-life battle. The ugliness of abortion, the ugliness of the genocide in Gaza is inescapable. And people are waking up to the truth. I remember in the 90s being a pro-life activist. When I told my family in the early 90s I was dedicating my life to ending abortion, the response wouldn't have been any worse if I said I'm joining the Ku Klux Klan. It was like, you're what?
Mhm.
and by the end of the decade, it was easy. And by the middle, by 2004 and 5, it was a safe position. It was a popular position, at least on our side of the aisle. But even in the Republican Party in the 90s, it was a fist fight to be pro-life. And I feel the arc with Gaza has been shorter. So do you look to the church fathers, or like who do you look to as an example of how and when to guide because you're right, if you don't respond to scandal, it exacerbates the scandal sometimes. And sometimes if you respond to it, you're amplifying it. And it just seems to me such a challenging dilemma. And
Yeah.
you don't want to create a sin of commission. You don't want to create a sin of omission. Do you look to who are your role models in this?
It's interesting you mentioned the church fathers because that was actually the area of focus when I studied at Oxford. I studied patristics, which is early church fathers, and actually studying the early church fathers was kind of the first chink in the armor against my Protestantism, because I was a Protestant at the time, and I thought Calvin was
Oh
a
my
huge
gosh.
hero of mine.
I didn't know
Sorry?
that. I just thought you were a French Vietnamese Catholic woman. I didn't
I was
know.
raised, yeah, well, I was raised culturally Catholic, but then I left to become a very
Oh,
zealous anti-Catholic Protestant. In
what?
fact,
How did I not know
yeah, a
this?
hardcore
Okay.
Calvinist. Yeah, I was actually Protestant for 11 years before I came back to the faith. I actually came back at Notre Dame Law School. But yes, but studying the church fathers at Oxford was it opened my eyes for the first time to um to some of the notions I had about Protestantism that were simply wrong. Anyway, but they're not the ones that I look to right now. So when I came into the faith, I was immediately attracted to the Carmelites, the Discalced Carmelites, like Saint Teresa of Avila, Saint John of the Cross, Saint Elizabeth of the Trinity, and Saint Therese of Lisieux. They deeply affected me. They, I have a more of a contemplative kind of nature. I love to pray. I love to spend time before adoration, and they're contemplative. This Discalced Carmelites are a contemplative order, and they're just filled with so much wisdom. If you read their writings, they're incredibly wise. They stress humility. They stress docility, obedience, and above all, a deep love of God. I mean, love is everything. That's what makes the world go round, as they say. But that's the basis of our faith. It's love. It's love of God and it's love of neighbor, and that's how we prove our love of God is how we love our neighbor. And many of us Catholics fail in that regard, as you know. But it was really reading them, and especially the little way of Saint Therese. If you're familiar with the way of humility, of simplicity, of just childlike simplicity and obedience, that probably has the greatest effect on me. And so I always try to approach life that way, with a childlike simplicity and humility. That doesn't mean being dumb. It doesn't mean being naive and sheltered or anything like that, or uneducated. It just means approaching things with deep charity towards all, even towards our enemies. And that includes how I approach any scandals, by the Pope, maybe by bishops, whatever. They're still our fathers in the faith, our spiritual fathers in the faith, whether we like it or not. And, I think it helps being raised Asian, because you're taught deep respect for your elders. Even when you completely disagree with them, you are taught, okay, you cannot speak a certain way to your elders. You can't be disrespectful. You can't be rude. And I remember, because I came to the United States when I was like 4.5 years old. And I was always taught this: respect for your elders, respect for your parents. And I was shocked by the way American kids were talked to their parents. I was like totally shocked. I was like, I cannot believe you talk to your mom that way. I would be I would be in so much trouble if I ever said that to my parents. So I guess there's a part of me that still has that approach when it comes to our spiritual fathers in the faith, even if I'm really angry that they've done something, or I think I'm very upset. I still always try to be respectful. I try to be humble. I try to be charitable and give them the benefit of the doubt. I mean, I don't. Here's the thing.
It's
I don't
interesting you should
take.
say that, Christine, because I have this charity, I think that's unusual for somebody with my ideology and my, sort of experiences towards the hierarchy. But I came into the church in Hawaii around Asians,
Mhm.
especially Filipinos, who are, very respectful. When I moved, my family and my children are half Asian. When we moved to Texas, I said, now don't start acting like white kids and being disrespectful to your dad, and I'll say it to him now. Hey, 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 you're acting like a white kid. Show me some respect. And they're like, you moved us to Texas, Dad. What do you want? But Yeah, that's something very interesting that your background has given you a gesture line towards the hierarchy that is different in the Anglosphere and especially Anglo culture, I think.
So I think that sometimes podcasters or influencers or whatever, we forget sometimes when we're out there saying angry things about the Pope or the bishops, sometimes we forget that there's a soul involved here, that bishop, and you might be really angry at him, but that's still a soul that Christ wants to save. So what is the most effective way that I can sort of reach out to that person? And I don't know, maybe help change his heart or help change his mind or his view about this. I don't know. Maybe that's naive. I know people have called me naive. I don't care. I mean, all that matters is I have to do what's right before God because we all stand before God one day. And I take that very, very seriously. We're all going to stand before God alone one day. And we're going to be alone. We're not going to be able to have a bunch of people around us. It's going to be you and God. That's it. And he's going to ask you to give an account of your entire life, everything you've said, everything you have thought privately in your mind, everything you have done. I take that very seriously. So some people might disagree with the way I approach things, might think I'm being too naive or maybe being too easy or whatever. I don't care. Got to do what is right before God and what's right in your conscience. So that's how I try to be balanced in my reporting on scandal. But I don't focus so much on scandal these days because I did that so much for 10 years. My head was in that for 10 years. I don't do that so much these days because I'm not sure how much it really helps people. Sometimes it can help, yes, occasionally, but it's not the main focus anymore.
And that's
So
why I watch your show because I can't it brings down my morale. There were shows that I really loved because they were catechetical. Oh, there's another show I watch. I forgot. You need to watch Josh Charles, Eternal Christendom.
yeah, I know
Um,
him.
Josh
Hmm.
Charles is amazing, and I've been his friend since he was a Protestant, and it's been
Wow.
great. It's been great to see. Now, forward boldly. That's Joan of Arc. Do you?
Yes.
So when you're part French, and you're Vietnamese and French. So did when you were coming into the church, were you attracted to it through the lens of your French and Vietnamese culture, or did you have a special affection to the French Catholic saints? Or
I have a deep, deep love for France. I have a deep love for France. It was actually my grandfather. He was a colonel in the French army when the French occupied Vietnam, which was at the time called Indochina. And so he met my grandmother on my mother's side, and they married, and then his French citizenship passed down through my mother to us. And I'm actually a dual French citizen, US French citizen. And so I've spent a lot of time in France. I lived there when I was very little, and then I went back again when I was 33 years old, spent a year there, and then I have since come back. And then I'm going to take my family again. This time, all my kids. I'm so excited about it. Next year, but I have a deep love of France, and yes, I have a deep love of the French saints. So like I mentioned, Saint Therese of Lisieux, French Carmelite, Saint Elizabeth of the Trinity, French Carmelite. I love the French saints. Saint Joan of Arc, obviously a very very amazing individual. Not a feminist. I know the feminists are trying to co-opt her. She's not transgender. I know a lot of people have tried to say that because
no,
she
yeah,
wore
exactly.
like a male uniform, which is ridiculous. Very humble, pious, courageous young woman. And so I actually founded Forward Boldly way back before I ever joined Church Militant. That was actually like my first little kind of audio podcast when I was first starting out as a total
And
newbie to all
and
this.
what year was that? What
And
year was that?
this was back in 2012, and I joined Church Militant in
Okay.
2014. So I had this kind of, it was like this radio thing that I did. Um, and I just interviewed a lot of people, and so it was my very first foray into any media or anything like that. And I liked this phrase from Saint Joan of Arc where she said, "In God's name, forward boldly." That was her battle cry. She would say that, holding up the banner, the standard of Jesus and Mary, and then she would say, "In God's name, forward boldly." And I thought, oh, that's a wonderful little phrase. I'll just use that. But yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Hey, my great grandfather was a British cavalry officer. So in my family, we were raised, believe it or not, it's funny with a really every joke was about the French. Don't everything was like, "Oh, what are you French?" Da, da, da. And and I think I kind of had this like subtle anti-French prejudice. And then one day I woke up, I'm like, my favorite novel's French, my favorite poem is French, my favorite play is French, my favorite I love Rene Girard, Cyrano de Bergerac. I memorized by heart in the 8th grade. In fact, the poster's right there right there is the poster to of Gerard Depardieu and his version of Cyrano de Bergerac. And I love Anatoly France. The Gods Will Have Blood is like my favorite novel. I've read it 15 times. And I just wish I could read French so I could read Cyrano de Bergerac,
Uh-huh.
in
It's a beautiful
verse.
language. It's a
Yeah.
beautiful. Well, it is interesting because there are a lot of bad things about France, especially how secular it's become. But what's interesting is when I went back there as an adult and I spent a whole year there and I got to know some good Catholic friends. There is actually a very deep Catholic beating heart of
Oh,
France,
yeah.
which you, sorry?
No, I agree with you. I love, as an Anglo from a Protestant background becomes Catholic. I was initially attracted to the English, like Chesterton, but I loved
Yeah.
Belloc.
Oh,
He
they're
was
wonderful.
both, you know.
Mhm,
But
mhm.
but now it's sort of the French writers that have really most attracted me. And I was just in Paris shooting a movie, and first time in France a couple of months ago, and everyone told me, "Oh, you're going to hate France. You're going to hate Paris." Even my French friends were like, "Don't judge us by Paris." I had nothing but beautiful experiences everywhere I went. I loved everybody. Everyone was kind. Everyone was beautiful. And I tripped into a very devout Catholic community just there for a couple weeks shooting a movie. And like I fell in love. We're shooting, I'll tell you offline, my next feature film is about a very famous French writer.
Mm,
And we're shooting it next year. And I can't wait to spend a couple of months in France shooting this movie. Yeah.
that sounds wonderful. Oh, you're gonna be in France. Oh, you're so lucky. I'm jealous. No, but really, it was wonderful because there, like I said, there's a deep beating heart of Catholicism that is kind of like I don't know how to explain it, but it's like in the soil, it's like in the bones of France that you no matter how much the secular government has tried to secularize France, they can't get it out. And everywhere you go in France, you still see the vestiges of the church and of faith everywhere, whether it's like little cornices on the side of these buildings with a saint or people not working on Sundays, shops closed because they're, you know, it's the day of, rest. It's hard to explain. There's like this how do you say it? There, it's hard to explain, but there was just when I spent a year there, it was like there was a depth and a profundity to the faith that you could feel in your soul, and like this faith that has stretched back for centuries and centuries and centuries. That's deeply rooted, like I said, in this very soil and the bones of France itself. And yeah, I just love it there. I love it there.
So what an interesting experience. You're born in Vietnam. You're raised by Vietnamese parents with the French background. You come to the church at Oxford at the,
It was
through the
actually later. It was actually at Notre Dame,
and I mean,
but
but you
Oxford was like the very
the
first,
chinks, the
like
church fathers. You're exposed to the church
yeah.
fathers. That was putting, you said, the chinks in the armor, and then Notre Dame. So you think the sort of perspective of the different you're seeing the church through the lens of different cultures has given you a unique perspective because you have, all these different backgrounds that you can kind of see the church through these different lenses.
Yes, and I mean, I feel very American because when I came here, I was 4 years old, and that was the primary culture that I was exposed to. I left Vietnam when I was only two, so I really don't remember very much of it. Then I lived in France for 2 years. Again, I don't remember a whole lot about that. Of course, I was raised in a fully Vietnamese household. We were completely Vietnamese, and my dad was constantly lamenting, like, Christine, you're getting too Americanized. That was like the one lament I would hear from him constantly. You're getting too Americanized.
Acting like white
Um,
kids.
But seeing the faith through the lens of different cultures, I would say actually I'm not sure it's so much the cultures as it is my experiences first completely outside the family of God as an unbaptized person for like the first 13 years of my life. I wasn't baptized till much later because my parents didn't
Wow.
understand. Yeah, they didn't understand their faith. They didn't understand the necessity of baptism or the sacraments or anything like that. We would, like I said, we're culturally Catholic. But that's where it ended. We didn't pray. Sometimes we went to mass, but again, it was a Vietnamese mass that was more like a social event for my family rather than, a time of prayer or anything like that. And so again, I didn't grow up really understanding the faith, which is why I left when I was 17 to become a Protestant, because it was in the Protestant context I actually heard the gospel really for the first time. And it kind of set my heart on fire. And I thought, oh, this must be the truth. But as far as I'm grateful because I was able to have that first 13 years of my life living as quote essentially a pagan, like unbaptized that experience and the experiences of God that I had as an unbaptized person, where I felt God drawing me, drawing me and me not knowing what it was. And then going through this period of being a Protestant was actually very helpful for me as well. And now, of course, I'm in the fullness of the faith as a Catholic.
So you were
Those two
baptized
periods of my life.
as a Protestant?
No, I was baptized as a Catholic at the age of 13, but I
Okay.
still didn't understand what I was doing or anything like that. And then I
Mm.
became a Protestant. I left the faith at age 17 to become this very anti-Catholic Calvinist for about 11 years, and then I came back to
Which
the faith.
which which ecclesial community did you um, come into the church? As a Christian, what ecclesial community attracted you to the faith? They were
You mean,
Calvinist. Was it like Foursquare or Calvary Chapel or Mainline?
well, you mean when I left the Catholic Church?
Hmm.
It was kind of non-denominational, so it's really funny because I grew up in Florida, and I know that you used to surf in Hawaii, right? You were
Yeah.
a surfer in Hawaii.
Well, I
I grew up on
wasn't a
the
good
East Coast of
surfer, but
Florida.
yeah. Pardon? So you were a
So I grew up on the
Florida
East.
surfers are the best because you have to fight over those little waves.
I've never been to Hawaii, but my sister goes all the time. She loves it there. I should go one day. I've never been, but she goes
You-
there like once a year with her family. She
and
loves
I'm
it. I
sure
think
she
she took her
tells you
honeymoon
she
there.
feels at home. It's my daughter. She's half Chinese, and we went to Taiwan, and she's 16 now. So she said she doesn't feel really at home in Texas. And I had to go to Taiwan for work, and she came with me, and she was really excited to see her. I'm not allowed into mainland China at the present by the CCP, but so we can't go
Well,
there. But so she went with me to Taiwan, and she goes, "I don't feel at home in Taiwan either, Dad." She's the only place I'll ever feel really at home is Hawaii. And I think you would go to Hawaii and feel immediately really at home.
I would love to visit one day. I would love to visit. But
You should do a
I know you.
pilgrimage to Kalapapa with your listeners.
Well, that's a good idea.
Yeah,
That's a good idea.
I'm sure you'd sell out in a week. You should do that.
But I know you used to surf. So I actually grew up on the East Coast of Florida. I used to attempt to surf. I was never any good at it. My sister was much better than me. She would actually win competitions. But I would actually skip school, go surfing, and we'd go hang out at Deerfield Beach. And the owner of the Island Surf Shop was a guy named Kirk Cottrell. And he passed away tragically from a surfing accident in South Africa. But he used to lead this Bible study. And my friend, who was also a surfer, told me about it. And she's like, "Oh yeah, there's free food. Also, there's other surfers there. So let's just go." So I was like, "Sure, why not?" And so I go to these surfer Bible studies, and that's where I hear the gospel for the first time. I'm sure I heard the gospel going to Catholic mass, but the thing is, it was in Vietnamese, and I didn't understand Vietnamese very well. So here I am, hearing someone talk about Jesus and what he did and how he came to die for us, all of that. And so by the third meeting that I went to, they do those little Protestant altar calls where they're like, okay, whoever wants to accept Jesus into your heart, raise your hand. So I raised my hand, and some other people did as well. And so at the end of the meeting, they took us to the back and they were like, okay, just repeat the sinner's prayer. And, the sinner's prayer is basically, it's very simple. It's, forgive me my sins. I'm sorry. Holy Spirit, come into my life and change me. And I prayed that. And I experienced a genuine conversion of heart. Now, was it the fullness of the faith? No, it wasn't. But the scales fell from my eyes. And for the first time in my life, I realized, wow, the meaning of life is to follow Jesus. That's what I knew for the first time in my life. Like, the meaning of life is Christ. I have to give my life to Christ. And my heart just was set on fire. And so what's really funny is I was into the whole skating, surfing, punk scene. And I decided to make these tracks, like TRACTS, in fluorescent colors with like skulls, with mohawks, and like scripture verses, and saying like Jesus was a punk, like Jesus understands your suffering, all this stuff. And I would actually go to like surf shops and skate centers and drop off like a bunch of these tracks just for kids to look at them. Um, but yeah,
That's
that's how
amazing. Our background is so great. I came in through Calvary Chapel.
I'm
Through
very familiar with Calvary Chapel. I used to attend Calvary Chapel.
It was Surfer Church. It was Bud Stonebreaker was a famous shaper of surfboards. Or Bill Stonebreaker, his son Bud was one of my best friends, and I loved it. I loved the people, So we have a very and I love punk and new wave, and Andrew Breitbart was one of my best friends. That's all we ever did was talk about music and punk. And the first poster I had in my office when I became a Christian was Jesus was a rock star. And so we had a very
That's funny.
similar coming into the church. That's interesting. And then
That
I
is
read the
funny.
church fathers like you, and I remember being, oh no, do I have to become Catholic and leave this wonderful community?
Hmm.
It was very
Hmm.
sad for me, actually, because I love the community so much.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's interesting. We have such similar. It's amazing how surf culture really evangelized so many people.
Mm. Hmm. Yeah. I was only in it for like, let's see, it was basically my high school year. I think my junior and high school year that I was in that whole culture. Then I went off to college and got plugged into like an evangelical free church with a great group of people. See, I'm so grateful for my Protestant experience because I see a lot of cradle Catholics today have certain ideas about Protestants. And because I met so many wonderful people in the Protestant community, I'm not necessarily prejudiced against them. I mean, I met people who are better than me, people who are just wonderful, good hearted, pure hearted people that I am certain will be in heaven. Um, I just want them to get to the fullness of the faith. And so I do use Stella Maris Media and Forward Boldly to try to reach out to those people as well. Not by banging them over the head and trying to get into like angry, contentious debates, but simply letting them know, look, the Eucharist completely changed my life. Sacrament of Penance completely changed my life for the better. I felt this huge burden lifted when I went to confession for the first time in my life. I mean, my life, the sins I used to struggle with, I don't struggle with anymore, all owing to the sacraments. I want them to come to the fullness of the faith because it will make their lives so much better. I desire that for my Protestant brothers and sisters. So I'm grateful that I was able to experience that and understand the mindset of Protestants and why it is that they object to the Catholic faith, you know, to help them overcome those things. So,
Yeah, well, when I graduated college, I had 3 goals. One was I was actually an atheist, but I was pro-life. So it was to end abortion, develop Ayn Rand's anthropology and epistemology because I was a Randian, and
mhm.
destroy the Catholic Church. Those were my 3 goals.
Really,
Yeah, I was very anti-Catholic, and
uh-huh.
I saw Catholicism as a menace, and that's a
Mm.
whole other story. But I was kind of because my high school girlfriend's father was a very prominent Catholic. Actually, Cardinal Bernardine was his best friend,
Wow.
and he
Well,
forced her to have
Bernardine
an
was not a good
abortion.
man.
When he forced her to have an abortion while I was at basic training.
Yeah, I've
So
heard
I'm
that
like,
story.
"Oh,
Yeah.
this is Catholicism?"
Hmm.
So and my grandfather was a Scientologist, so I grew up hearing a lot of anti-Catholic prejudice. And then this happened, and I just, so when I have a very visceral reaction to anti-Catholicism, and I have to remember how awful I was not that long
Right.
ago,
Right.
and I have to try to know where they're coming from.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I
You
actually
said
want to have
something
you
really
on my show sometimes. You can talk about your whole background because you have such an interesting background. I want my audience to learn about that. So
Yeah, no, anything, and you need to have Bear Wozniak on. The great surf legend Bear Wozniak. He
I've
has a
heard of him. Yeah.
He is amazing. He writes for Sophia Press. He has all these great books. He has a TV show on EWTN that I always do little cameos on, where they ride motorcycles. But
I think I heard, I watched or heard one interview that you had with him. It was really interesting. And he was talking about his book. What was it, like the 12 Rules of Manliness? And so
yeah,
I was like, oh, I am getting that for my son. So I actually ordered that book for my son.
yeah, he is awesome, awesome. He's a great guy, and he was Catholic, Protestant, Catholic, so he has
Mhm.
a similar journey on the chat. You said something interesting about so many of your evangelical friends, your Protestant friends, you are better than you. I have so many of my Protestant friends. I mean, pretty much everyone I know is better than me. Everyone I know, like Fulton Sheen says, is with the information we have, the worst person in every room is us. Like, I know everything about me. So, but my evangelical friends, I look at them. So many of them seem more godly than me. They're kind, they're humble, they're gentle. But because of theology, they can hold to very, very, very virulent, cruel ideologies. And this is how kind of our friendship, how we really got to know each other, was over Christian Zionism. And so Christian Zionism, I say to myself every day, whether I hear people talking about immigrants as a quote unquote sea of human refuse, or they say things like
Awful.
flatten Gaza or Palestinians are the reincarnation of Amalekites. or all this kookiness that comes through writers like Jonathan Cahn, or vileness that comes through someone who was a Catholic at one time until like Henry VIII, he got divorced, Dinesh D'Souza, I guess, and then he became Protestant. But I always will say to myself, because I have a very, I'm very easily emotionally manipulated, and I'm impulsive. I am so grateful to be a Catholic that it restrains me from so many enthusiasms of cruelty that I have seen my Protestant friends get swept away by. Have you noticed that? And that's why I'm just so grateful for the church.
Completely grateful because she provides us guidance, provides us sure guidance. And that's why we need to listen to her. That's why we need to be docile and humble and obedient. And even when we don't understand necessarily, you have to have that attitude of docility to listen to the magisterium and her teachings. And one of the things that I consistently find is very difficult for American Catholics to accept is the church's condemnation of atomic bombs. Okay. The church has never, I see people twist themselves, Catholics, okay, good so-called pro-life Catholics trying to twist themselves into pretzels, justifying the dropping of atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And trying to explain why actually John Paul II supported that. And I'm like, are you insane? It's like, but also I'm grateful for the Pope's stance towards Gaza. He's repeatedly spoken out on their behalf. And that's something I'm grateful that Pope Francis did as well. And I haven't had as much experience with the Protestant Zionists, because that's just not my area. Like I don't hang out with those people. I don't really interact with those people. But I've had experiences with Catholic Zionists, and I find them to be a lot more disturbing in a sense because we actually have Catholic teaching, and we have popes and bishops speaking out on behalf of the slaughter going on there, and yet you still have these people who, for whatever reason, support all of that going on. And it's just like, do you realize when you justify this that you're kind of turning into a moral monster? I mean, are you aware that that's what you're doing? I've lost friendships over this, unfortunately, sadly, not because I dropped them. It's because they ditched me. They were angry that I was saying stuff. And it's not like I'm out there. I'm not at all harshly condemning Israel. I try to keep it very focused on Netanyahu's government, people like Smotrich or Gavir or anything like that, the IDF. And yeah, it's sad to me that there are Catholics with what I would say a cult loyalty to this foreign government who, and this is what disturbs me the most, they would rather run to the defense of a foreign secular government than they would to their fellow Christians who are dying at the hands of the IDF. That's what disturbs me
You
the
never
most.
mention them.
You're going to throw your fellow brothers and sisters under the bus because you want to support some secular government in the Middle East? That boggles my mind.
Well, they never mention them. They never mention them. What I did, and I don't like talking about that. I mentioned it a lot, so maybe I do like talking about it. But on October 7th, the first thing I did was put armed guards outside of a vulnerable synagogue in Africa. First thing I did. And I had a very emotional response to October 7th. I was very angry. I said in my own little head, I didn't say it out loud. I didn't write it. I'm not a lunatic. But I instantly thought as I watched this footage, flatten Gaza. That went through my own little head. I was so angry. But then of course I check myself and my impulses don't drive my thoughts. And within 2 weeks, our organization, Vulnerable People Project, was serving wounded Christians, and that were on their 2,000-pound bomb fell on the church. So it's been striking to me the way they do not even mention the plight of Christians in the West Bank or Gaza. And then when I do, I'm somehow an awful human being. And it is very strange to me. And these are the same people that will justify the use of the bomb.
Exactly.
I came into church on August 6th, 2003. That's when I was baptized and confirmed Catholic. Because my two main goals in life are to eliminate strategic nuclear weapons and an abortion. Like I pick big goals because I'll fail and I can't feel bad about myself. So those are my two goals. And that's why I picked August 6th. But by the way, Ronald Reagan's goal was to defeat the Soviet Union and to eliminate nuclear weapons. Those were his two goals, Ronald Reagan. We went from where that was conservatism to now you have Catholics. I've seen priests on PragerU. They had a priest try to justify the dropping of atomic bombs. One of those cities was a Catholic city.
I know.
I mean, there were two cities nuked in history. One of them was Catholic.
Wiped out 60% of Japan's Catholics when they dropped on Nagasaki. 60% of Japan's Catholics. It wiped out 24 Catholics who were inside Urakami Cathedral, who were with two priests who were hearing their confessions. I mean, yeah, just tragic. And I've got arguments with Catholics before, trying to twist themselves into pretzels, justifying that. Basically, arguing that, well, there were no civilians in Japan because they were all conscripted. Really? Little babies were conscripted? I mean, it's the same argument people try to use in Palestine, just dehumanize them. There are no civilians in Palestine. They're all terrorists. I mean, it's the lesson of history is you always dehumanize a population first so that you can justify killing them.
Yeah, no, it's right. And they're the same people. And it's people that wouldn't have justified, they'll use Nagasaki and Hiroshima to justify Gaza today, which to me is striking. They'll say, well, if you're going to condemn Gaza, I guess you're going to condemn Dresden. Yeah, actually, a lot of my family was killed in Dresden. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's not an argument. They're both
Great
wrong.
Comparison, by the way. Thank you for that. It's strange that this is their defense. And I have a very controversial, I mean, I don't know if it's controversial. It's not out yet, but I have a column that will be at American Conservative this week where I say they're trying to make the battle on the right between Nick Fuentes and sane conservatism. No, the battle is between those who justify genocide and those who don't. It's about the Gaza genocide. And what's interesting, I say in the article, I take Victor Davis Hanson and others, or Lila Rose, who recently did an absurd tweet, just really embarrassing. She doesn't even know that was a nail in her little coffin. She ended her relevance for the next generations to come.
I saw someone sent me that tweet, and it surprises me because she has tweeted before sympathetic to Gaza. Like she's tweeted that before, where she seems to have made an about face.
Wants to be relevant. She fumbled her career. She built a big database early on. She's always second guessing. She's addled by insecurity. She drives me nuts. And because I really admired her, we were friends, and I'm just. But she's surrounded by grifters who give her bad advice that she respects, and she's just like lost in a dark wood. And that tweet was repulsive. It was actually even worse than the policy of the government of Israel, because she says that the Christians in the Holy Land would be better under a Jewish state. So in other words, she's advocating what she does. I don't think she understands the issue, but that implies that she wants Bethlehem to fall to Israel. She wants to expand the occupation, expand the settlements. Really brutal, really unbelievable. And I think she doesn't want to be prophetic. This is why I want to criticize Barron. I want to criticize who's the father with the #1 podcast in the world?
Mike Schmitz.
Mike Schmitz. Mike Schmitz early on defended Israel and has been quiet about the atrocities. It's right. It's maddening. And they're careful not to go too far in front at defending the crimes of the state of Israel. But they'll do things like, well, for example, there's this ruse, like look at Nigeria. All of a sudden, Bill Maher cares about Nigeria. Mark Levin cares about Nigeria. I've been in Nigeria for 4 years, providing guards for churches, hospitals, seminaries, and a synagogue. I care. We don't talk a lot about that because we don't want to bring attention to it. You don't see a lot of our work there because we don't want to signal what we do to provide security. But all of a sudden they care so much.
I know. No, I've had the same thing. People come to me when I mention Israel. They're like, well, you talk about Israel so much. What about Nigeria? What about Christians dying there? And I'm like, if you knew anything about my background, you would actually know that I've done so much reporting on Christians dying in Nigeria. Like that's actually been the bulk of my reporting is Christians dying in the hands of Islamists in either Nigeria or Congo or Uganda or wherever. So it's just a deflection. That's all it is.
Christine, you would love one of my favorite X threads. I try not to engage in that because of my temperament isn't healthy. I'd get on a plane and want to fight somebody for being rude to me on X. But I do, and every once in a while. And someone was attacking me saying, well, what about Nigeria, and then someone came under and said, well, actually, Jason Jones is in Nigeria providing. Well, they're like, well, what about Sudan? Well, actually, someone came in. Here's a video from Jason in Sudan. Like, I didn't even know these people like 20 years ago. And then it was like, what about Iraq? Jason was, and then the guy just shut up. But it doesn't matter. I have friends that all they do is talk about Sudan. For whatever reason, this is their passion. I have friends that all they do is fight abortion because this is their passion. Everyone, now my organization's from the child in the womb to the child in Darfur. Okay, but somebody can be just focused on Nigeria. That's good. I want that. Those are my partners. Some people are just focused on defending the child in the womb. Lila Rose, get back to that. Get out of the Middle East. You're embarrassing yourself. Others, it's just Gaza. But this idea that to defend one group, the child in the womb or the child in Gaza, you have to speak about everything is absurd. You can attack me. That would be a mistake because I have an organization that's truly committed to defending those who no one else will defend because of social cost or danger or whatever. That's our apostolate. That's our mission. But that's a lot of our partners' missions is specifically Darfur, Nuba Mountains, Gaza, Nigeria. And this is great. We need people, the child in the womb, that specialize. So this criticism that we can't talk about Gaza because of Nigeria, and guess what? I don't see American politicians cheering Boko Haram on. But the Speaker of the House went to the West Bank and visited settlers, a settlement that was attacking Christians, and told them basically, forward boldly, keep it up. We had an American powerful Christian go to the West Bank and tell settlers to keep going. Unbelievable. So, of course, yeah, this is important.
No, that's exactly it. That is exactly it. We do talk about Nigeria. We talk about all these other things. But the difference here is our government isn't giving the Islamist terrorists in Nigeria $4 billion a year in arms and funding. They're not doing that. Okay. They haven't given them $300 billion over the last 70 years in arms and funding. They're not doing that with anyone except a small country in the Middle East. And they're supposed to be the good guys. They're supposed to be the good guys. And I'm sorry, the things they're doing there, it's the opposite. And the real reason people ask that question about, well, what about Nigeria? What about this? What they're really trying to do, I think, is they're trying to accuse you of anti-Semitism. They're saying, you're so obsessed with the Jews. Why are you always talking about Israel and the Jews and you're not talking about these? You must be obsessed. You must be anti-Semitic, which is obviously that's the trope that's always brought up anytime you criticize Netanyahu or the Israeli government and their policies and how they wage war. That's always the trope. What's good to know is that people aren't falling for it anymore because it's become so meaningless today. It's as meaningless as the word racist. And that does a disservice to genuine anti-Semitism, which is a sin. You can never hate anyone based on their ethnicity or race. The Catholic Church condemns it as a mortal sin. You can't do that. But when you're calling everything anti-Semitic, you do a disservice to genuine anti-Semitism. So these people are actually undermining their own cause by calling everybody that. And I think someone called you that. I'm just like, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen.
I've seen that yet, but I'm glad it finally happened. I don't know how it took so long for it to happen. It's bizarre. I just did a podcast with Halil Sayegh talking about our concern about the rise of anti-Semitism. Oh, and I was going to say this earlier. I had this article I suspect will come with some controversy where I challenged Victor Davis Hanson on his absurd non-argument. And I compare Nick Fuentes to like Mark Levin, Douglas Murray, Ben Shapiro. And how do we combat the rise of Jew hatred with the youth, which is real, like it's really, really real. And then you have people like Mark Levin saying these nasty anti-Semites, they're disgusting, they're vermin, they're evil, they're just like the dirty Arab Muslims who are incompatible with Western civilization. And then, you got a member of Congress laughing at dead Palestinian babies and saying nuke Gaza twice. And then, so is this, if I'm a 17-year-old and I have to choose between Ben Shapiro, Douglas Murray, Mark Levin, Congressman Fine, and Nick Fuentes, they're going to choose Nick Fuentes 99 out of 100 times. And the reality is, Nick may or may not, I don't know much about the kid, may or may not deny the genocide that happened, the Holocaust, but you have politicians today encouraging a genocide. And they'll mock the youth saying, well, they're just being brainwashed on TikTok. You had Van Jones say, well, all of these young people are hating Israel because they're staring at TikTok. Well, what did he actually said? They're seeing dead babies and dead babies and dead babies, as if we should be upset that a generation of young people are horrified by an endless stream of dead babies.
Yeah.
This is something quite noble about Gen Z. And I definitely don't want to see the rise of Jew hatred and collective punishment. The Israelis are no more responsible for the crimes of the state of Israel than the Russians were for the Soviet Union, or we are for our government. No more, no less. But most definitely, the Jews are not responsible. And the most articulate voices against the genocide that I admire are Jewish. So, yeah, this is why it's, to me, a scandal that our bishops, I'm so grateful for the Holy Father, Pope Leo, and Cardinal Pizzaballa. But I would like to see prominent Catholics like Bishop Barron, like obviously Matt Fradd jumped to the other team, like Father Mike Schmitz, but they're afraid to stand up to power. This is just simply it. They are afraid to stand up to power. Why, it is embarrassing to me, Christine Niles. Sorry for the rant. I'm actually humiliated and embarrassed that we are the ones providing the housing for the Christians in Gaza. Why should such a small Catholic apostolate be the ones providing housing and water and food to the Christians in Gaza? Why is that? How is that? It's because the large, powerful organizations are afraid of power. And they're afraid that by serving the most embattled Christian community in the world will somehow come with risk and loss.
Mm-hmm.
This is very sad. And
Totally.
that's why when you were sharing my stuff, I thought, oh no, don't do that, Christine Niles. Please don't do that. It's coming with a cost. So that's why I'm so grateful for you. But here's what's interesting. Things have changed in the past 6 months. And it'll be interesting to see all these people running to our side, singing from the rooftops in defense of the Palestinians. Why? It's coming.
Well, yeah, and things have already changed. So much to talk about. But you mentioned TikTok and how people were seeing, basically Gaza genocide live streamed, in 4K. And now, of course, TikTok has been sold to an individual who is now suppressing all of that. So you can't really see that anymore. And if you notice, you don't really see it very much on X either. And so it's because it's the censorship machine. And at this point, I think it's too late. Like, we've already seen too much. And I'll say this, and I shared this with you privately, but I haven't said it publicly. I never, ever thought about Israel before October 2023. Like, it never entered into my mind. It wasn't part of my thoughts. I didn't really take an interest. I was deeply empathetic towards the Jews and what they went through during the Holocaust. I had visited Dachau concentration camp, which is a very deep and painful experience for me. I've read about World War I and World War II from the Jewish perspective. So I always had deep empathy for what Jews suffered during that time. But I never really paid any attention to Israel or Palestine or that conflict. I just thought it's too complicated for me to get into. I don't know enough about it. I'm going to focus on my own stuff. But then, of course, October 7th happens, and then it was the Israeli reaction. That happened. And I did this show, I did Forward Boldly on October 18th, I believe, where I, of course, condemned what happened, during October 7th as demonic. It was diabolical, and Hamas needed to be brought to justice because nobody should be killing innocent people like that, obviously. But then I also condemned the response. I said, this is disproportionate, it violates just war. This is total war, which the church has never approved. You can't exercise total war against a people. You can't deliberately starve a population, which is what Yoav Gallant was saying at the time. We're going to cut off all fuel, all electricity, all food, all supplies. They act like animals. We're going to treat them like animals. Of course, conflating terrorists with just innocent Palestinian civilians. And that bothered me. And I was just very calmly letting people know, look, you Catholics, we can't approve of this. This is genocide. This is a violation of just war. Here are the principles of just war. This is why we can't support it. And I was so surprised by all the backlash that I got. I was really surprised, people calling me anti-Semitic and a Hamas supporter and just things that were completely irrational. And then we were given a staff-wide email by our former boss, essentially forbidding us from ever talking about this publicly, because someone else had also mentioned it. Another staff member had also published something about what was happening in Gaza. And we got an email promptly, staff-wide email, didn't name me, but it was to the entire staff saying, no more discussion of Gaza. That's it. Didn't explain why, just we're not talking about it anymore. And so I was never allowed to talk about it anymore. And also I was a little bit gun shy. I was a little taken aback by the not only the backlash that I got, but the lack of support from my own boss, in my own organization. And so I became a little gun shy even to talk about it for a while, until I started seeing your posts on Facebook. They just started popping up on my feed occasionally, and you would say something about Gaza. And I, of course, was seeing the same thing everyone else was seeing on X, all these horrible images coming from Gaza and these little children, just totally breaking my heart. But I still refrained from really saying anything about it. But then I kept seeing your stuff pop up on Facebook. And I'd be like, gosh, I agree completely with what Jason is saying. I'm glad he's saying this. And I was thinking to myself, I need to finally broach the topic. It's been a few years and I've got to finally broach it. I need to invite Jason onto my show to just talk about this. But then things got in the way. I got busy, whatever. But then I'd see your stuff pop up my feed. And then just out of the blue one day, you sent me a message sharing one of your articles. So that was the perfect opportunity to finally invite you on my show. And I think since then, it kind of opened the floodgates. I haven't been, yes, there was pushback. Obviously, there was backlash and people got mad. But you just have to develop thick skin. Obviously, you've been through all this. You have to develop thick skin, and you have to kind of really understand why you're doing what you're doing. Because if you care about human opinion, if you care more about human respect and opinion, then yeah, I can see why people stay quiet. Father Mike Schmitz has way more to lose than I do.
You're right.
Bishop Barron has way more to lose than I do. They would get massive backlash, lots of funding pulled. It's not as if what I did, though, was nothing. I was scared. Okay, I was scared because I run a very little media nonprofit. It helps to support my family. I'm a single mom. I've got 4 children living at home. And so I rely on a lot of this to support my family. So I was scared. I was legitimately scared, thinking if I do this, I might lose some of the money that I need to support my family. But I decided, you know what? I've taken leaps of faith in the past. I've trusted God. I know I'm doing the right thing. I know I have to do this. And therefore, I just gave it up to God. I was just like, Lord, I'm going to hand this over to you. I'm going to do what I believe is right. And I trust that you will take care of my family as you've always taken care of us in the past. And he has. He always takes care of us. So the best thing is my conscience is clear. And I'm not sure Bishop Barron or Father Schmitz or any of these other people who refuse to talk about this, I don't know if their conscience can be totally clear. It is a scary thing to take that risk. It's very scary. But if you trust in God and you know that you're doing the right thing, God will always have your back, always.
Well, Christine, and that's why I so appreciate your courage. And you are right. I remind myself that someone like a Bishop Barron or Father Mike Schmitz, they've become so big. They have a responsibility to how many employees do they have, and if they lose 5% of their donors, how many people do they have to lay off? And I'm sure these are all of the things that go through their mind. And I do have to be charitable, but I have Ecclesiastes 4:1 tattooed onto my right hand, my right arm. So when people shake my hand, they ask what it is, and it's King Solomon saying, "I looked all over the world, and all I see is oppression. And on the side of the oppressor is power, and on the side of the oppressed there is no one." And when I founded my apostolate, it was really kind of this idea that I had as a soldier, as a 17-year-old high school dropout, 19 when I had the idea, as an atheist, that I wanted to fight abortion and defend children in war zones and serve the most vulnerable people on earth. And I remember thinking, I'm a loser. I'm a high school dropout. I'm an infantryman. I'm going to go to college. I'm going to do my things, but I'm really just riffraff. So I have nothing to lose with my life. So why don't I just give my life to the people that comes with a cost? I knew there would come at a cost to serve the child in the womb. This was the late 80s. It was not popular to be pro-life in the late 80s and a pro-life activist. But I also, as a young infantryman, I said, I want to serve the most vulnerable people on earth when it comes at a cost, because I'm a loser. And I still say that, I'm a loser with high self-esteem, No failure will undermine my confidence, and no success will make me stop feeling like a loser. And then when you have people that their
You're not a
identity,
loser.
but hey, I have high self-esteem, so don't take that from me. So when you have people that their identity is built in success, someone like Lila Rose or someone like Bishop Aaron, they have these sort of like metrics of success that they hold themselves accountable to. Then it becomes very hard to defend the vulnerable consistently, because I find that I always say to my staff, like, okay, we're going to talk about this week. Watch us lose 10% of our donors on this one. Oh, we're going to talk about this week. This is going to shock folks. Like, but yet what we seek to do is just be grounded in the church teaching, and just to stand with the most vulnerable people on earth. Even if we don't succeed, I say we're losers who help losers, and together we'll lose. Like, this is it, but it'll be together. And we want people to know that they're loved. We want the Christians and Catholics in Gaza, the people of Gaza, the orphans in Gaza, to know that they're loved. And I thank you for sharing your show with us, and your platform, because I think you're going to have one of the most successful shows in the years to come, because it's grounded in the church. And I think we're going to come out of this sort of raucous phase we've had for the past 10 years. I think people are already tired of it.
They are. The tide is definitely turning. The tide is definitely turning. I've seen, like you mentioned, Tucker Carlson, Nick Fuentes. And I didn't really get into that whole, dust up. I know a lot of people were very upset about that, but I don't know if you watched that interview. I sat through the whole thing. I watched all of it. And what I saw was Tucker Carlson repeatedly pushing back against this idea of blood guilt and identity politics, and painting this entire race with a broad brush. He was pushing back against anti-Semitism. He did it repeatedly throughout this 2-hour interview. He would bring it back up again and say, well, this is not Christianity. We don't believe in blood guilt. God looks at us and judges us as individuals, and that's how we have to approach everybody, including Jews or anybody. Who's pushing back against it. And so for his critics to now turn it on its head and claim the opposite, the whole thing is completely dishonest. And something else too, that's totally dishonest, is you have a bigger problem with this 30-year-old podcaster, Fuentes, that the fact that he platformed him, than the fact that Ben Shapiro would platform Benjamin Netanyahu multiple times, a man who is literally responsible for the death of tens of thousands of innocent civilians in Palestine. You don't have a problem with that. That's okay. But you have a problem with this kid, who said some things that I certainly don't agree with. But
no, but you know what? He's an aggrieved young man. It was actually a friend of mine, a black friend of mine, who was one of Nick's best friends. He's a good friend of mine. And I used to hate Nick. Nick says, like, oh, mixed race kids are ugly. Like, my kids are mixed race. Like, what are you talking about? Like, this is the first thing I heard Nick Fuentes say. This is how I heard of them. I'm like, wait, what did this kid say? This was like maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And a friend of mine said, Jason, you have friends in the Nation of Islam. You have friends in the 5% nations, this black friend of mine. Those are ethno-nationalists, religions. You have friends that are Zionists, Jewish friends. Those are ethno-nationalists. Why does Nick anger you so much? And I said, well, Malcolm X's dad was pulled, this is what I told him. Malcolm X's dad was pulled across train tracks and cut in half by the Ku Klux Klan. I understand how he was radicalized. I understand how young black men in the 50s were attracted to the Nation of Islam. I understand Jews being hyper-vigilant for their security. This all makes sense to me. But a white kid from an Illinois suburb, Chicago suburb, I don't get it. And then my black friend says, I need to have a mom, but he's kind of private. He said, Jason, you don't think this generation of young white boys is aggrieved? You didn't have it. You had Columbus Day and Thanksgiving, and you celebrated the Pilgrims. This generation grew up out of the womb. You're racist, sexist, colonist, homophobic, anti-Semitic. They're just brutalizing children, young children. He goes, he represents an aggrieved generation. Even my sons, they're mixed. All their friends are mixed, and their best friend's Jewish. They say their whole generation loves Nick. So if you better listen to what Nick Fuentes says to understand how this generation feels aggrieved by pornography, by app dating, by endless wars, by AI obliterating any future hope for, a fulfilling career. They're dreaming of being a writer or a filmmaker, and they're just seeing everything erased. The prospects of love, of marriage, and they're angry. So what I felt like Tucker did was very fatherly to Nick. and said, we're Christians. We don't believe like this. He wasn't just talking to Nick, who's a human being too, but he was talking to the millions and millions and millions of young people. My children go to a Baptist homeschool thing, and I was really upset because they had this like Christians United and the Christians United with Israel thing, something like this. And it was free pizza. And my kids went. And they said everyone went. And they had to listen to a talk because they wanted the free pizza. And I said, well, how did the students react? These are Baptists. And my daughter said, Dad, well, they were all like holding their hands up and giving the teacher the finger behind their hand. These Baptist kids at this Baptist homeschool thing. I said, really? I'm like, yeah, they're tater tots. I'm like, what's a tater tot? They call themselves, these are middle schoolers. They call themselves tater tots. These are Protestant kids who are homeschooled to go to Christian Zionist churches that are giving the speaker the bird behind their hand. They're there for the free pizza. And they're tater tots. And my daughter told me what a tater tot is. That's what these young middle schoolers call themselves who love Andrew Tate.
Hmm.
There's a real problem here.
Mm-hmm.
There's a real problem here. We can't ignore the problem. And this problem is caused by the genocide in Gaza, period. End of story. This is what has pushed it to a crisis point. I think pornography and app dating and the death of Eros for generations now is at the heart of it. But Gaza is what pushed this to a tipping point. And so you're right. We need to address Jew hatred, anti-Semitism, and cruelty. But we're not going to ignore the crimes of the state of Israel. We're not.
Entirely. Yeah. And I'm not here to defend Fuentes because he has said some things that are, to me, are legitimately offensive, like very anti-woman, a few things, making jokes about the Holocaust. But here's the thing. I did watch his podcast after Charlie Kirk was assassinated. And I actually re-aired that. Like, I've never aired anything by Fuentes because I've so strongly opposed what he has said and done. Some of the things have been so just beyond the pale. But that one I did air because he sounded much more mature. It sounded like Charlie Kirk's assassination was really a real turning point for him. I did not mean to bring up that pun at all, but it seemed to change him. And he admitted in that podcast that he actually regretted a lot of the things that he has said in the past. He actually said that. And then he said, it's time for me and all of us to grow up because life is serious. This guy got killed. And it's time for us to kind of grow up and step up and start leading in a way that's consistent with our Christian faith, because he was a Catholic. Now,
and he was tamping down anti-Semitic conspiracy theories in that episode. I watched it.
And, I did get attacked. Some people are like, how could you air him? He's a horrible person, blah, blah, blah. And you're just being duped. He's just a grifter he's going to say anything to get people in. I say, okay, well, time will tell, but he does seem sincere in this episode. I'm trying to give him benefit of the doubt. He seems like he's regretted things. He seems like he does want to start leading in a more mature way. And so whatever, time will tell. But yeah, sorry, what were you saying?
No, I agree with you there. And I look to Nick Fuentes. I hope, I tell our mutual friend that he has this sort of like the way that Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali transformed from sort of this radical, the Nation of Islam is a silly religion that says God is a black man. It's not Islam. It's a strange American religion that was birthed with so many strange American religions in the early 20th century. But, when you look, it was understandable when Muhammad Ali, Cassius Clay in the early 60s was attracted to this. It says, not only are you not subhuman, you are the greatest. You are the image of God. You are beautiful, And of course, that was very attractive. And so many young people are attracted to Nick Fuentes, who's saying, look, you're not this, you're not that, you're not this and that, you're this. But that's why it was so great to see Tucker Carlson be the first person to talk to this young man in a fatherly way and talk to that generation in a respectful way, saying, hey, we hear you, but we're Christians. And as a Christians, Nick said something yesterday or the day before, someone sent me on that was really bizarre on sex and marriage, and it was very weird. And he's just, it was childish, but he's young. But I'm supposed to be more upset with him than Mark Levin openly advocating genocide on a mainstream Christian platform 24/7, or a member of Congress laughing at real children dead? No, I'm sorry, I'm not. No, I'm not.
Yeah. No,
I'm
it's
more.
total hypocrisy.
Mark Levin is a wealthy old man, and he should be wise. When I was Nick's age, Christine Niles in full scandal, at his age, I was an atheist, but I was reading the Bible. I would go out, get drunk, carouse, womanize, go home. And I remember I was in Waikiki, I had a little apartment, and I would be drunk half the time, falling asleep to J. Vernon McGee's The Bible Bus. I don't know if you know that radio show. It's like, this is
No.
J. Vernon McGee. Welcome to the Bible Bus. And today we're in the book of Leviticus, you know? And I was just a wild atheist young man trying to find his way. He's a young man. If I had a national platform when I was his age, it would have been a horrible scandal as well. But Mark Levin is an old man who has lived a beautiful, privileged life. And he's had plenty of time to be thoughtful and reflect. And yet he's still a raging genocidal bigot.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's total hypocrisy. And yeah, I agree with you. I'm grateful that Tucker took a more fatherly approach to him. I think that's more effective. And I know there was pushback from people like saying, "Oh, well, he gave him a softball interview. Like, we know that he can do hard interviews. Like, look, why wasn't he like the way he was with Ted Cruz?" Well, it's like, okay, Ted Cruz, that's a completely different situation. This is a man who's taken more than $1 million from AIPAC. This is a man who says that the reason that he is in Congress is essentially to defend the interests of Israel. I mean, and this is a politician, this is like a grown man politician, very wealthy, very powerful. And Tucker's not going to come at him in the same way he's going to come against this 30-year-old kid. It's just going to be a
Well,
completely
Christine,
different approach.
I think he would have, because I'll disagree with you a little bit. Ted Cruz was gaslighting and just lying and being childishly manipulative right to Tucker's face, where Nick was just being totally transparent. I think if Nick said, well, it says in the New Testament that the Jews, the blood of Jesus is on the Jews and they have blood guilt, I think Tucker would have said, what? I think Tucker would have
exactly.
smacked him. But the thing is, Nick Fuentes did not gaslight, dissemble, or try to manipulate Tucker Carlson. But
he actually agreed with him. He actually agreed with his points.
Yeah, and that's why I have hope for him and his generation. And that's why I think your show is so important, because so many of these young people are attracted to the extremes of. I just talked to a friend, and he said he was basically just escaped a Catholic cult after many, many years. And he said he was basically living in a cult-like environment. And I do think, unfortunately, so many of the young Catholics that watch Nick are attracted to some of the more, how do I say it? How would we say? They're not in line with the church.
Right.
They're rebelling against the church, and in the name of the church, in the name of Catholicism. And so I think that's why a show like yours is so important. And I hope more and more young people watch it, especially because they are looking, with AI. I say the only thing left for young people, I tell this to my kids, the only way left for you to be excellent is holiness. AI is taking away all of the ways in which we can show our greatness as human beings. Because I can write a screenplay, and you can go on ChatGPT and write a screenplay in 2.3 seconds that's better than the one that I spent 6 years writing. But the one place left for young people is in what the one way that we can show excellence that's left for us is in our vocation, loving God and loving our neighbor, holiness. And I'm hoping that more and more young people, young people want to be great. They want to excel. And really the one place left, I think, now is just what we were created to do, loving our neighbors and loving God. And your show is such a great example of that. What is next for you? And how does I want everyone to follow you and make you part of the regular weekly media schedule. I'm absurd. Like, I literally schedule, like, I read from this time to this time. I'll watch YouTube videos from this time to this time. So how do
That's good.
people add you to their weekly media diet?
You could find me at stellamaris.media. That's stellamaris.media. And, I'm on YouTube and all these other platforms. You want to look up Christine Niles, I'm on X. You can find me anywhere basically. But yeah, that's stellamaris.media. We are a nonprofit. So, and we do rely on people's donations. Like I mentioned to you before, I did lose some subscriptions and donations ever since I started being a little bit more outspoken about what's happening in Gaza. And I have to thank you. I have to thank you because I'm so grateful that you just kept being persistent on social media about this, writing about it, speaking out about it, because really it was you and your persistence and me just seeing those on my feed over and over and over again that really got me to finally get the courage to start speaking out about this. So I want to thank you. I think the work you're doing with Vulnerable People Project is incredible. I try to get people to support your work because there are not very many charities and nonprofits that I trust to donate money to, but yours is definitely one of them that I do trust. And so I hope lots of people will support your work too, because you are just doing absolutely incredible work around the world for people most in need. But yeah, thank you, stellamars.media. And I air both Forward Boldly, which is a commentary thing. And then I do a short newscast once a week as well. But as far as my future, I mean, that's just what I want to keep doing for the foreseeable future. I want to be doing more travel, like more pilgrimages, taking people along those pilgrimages, getting video. I did that with Poland. I also took a retreat at a monastery, a convent recently where I got video of that as well. I want to do a little bit more of that in the future if the funds allow.
I think you with your audience, that would be something great. And I think you should do Hawaii and you should do Kalapapa to go
I would
see
love
where
to.
St. Damien and St. Mother Mary Ann Cope
I would
cared
love
for
to.
those with leprosy. Can I ask
Yeah.
you one last question? Stella Maris, Our Lady Star of the Sea. That's your name. Obviously, you didn't just pull that name out of a hat. Like, what does that name mean to you, and why did you choose that name?
Well, I don't know if people are familiar with what happened with the self implosion of Church Militant, and I won't get into all the details. I do have one video on my YouTube channel where I address all of that back in 2023. But essentially, um, I resigned in November of 2023. There was a scandal that ensued involving our former boss, who also was forced to resign over a breach of morality clause. And out of respect for him, I'm not going to go into further details, but essentially, it completely self imploded. And I was scrambling, trying to figure out how am I going to support my family? What am I going to do? I just didn't know. I didn't know what I was going to do. And I don't even remember the circumstances. I just remember praying a lot to Our Lady Star of the Sea. There's a beautiful image of her. A friend of mine sent this to me. I think she found this painting at a thrift shop or she ordered it from Amazon. I can't remember, but it's just a really beautiful image of Our Lady standing over very dark, tumultuous waters, just the waves. And there she is just standing so placidly and so peaceful. And there's light around her. And she's basically this guiding star. And that felt like my life at the time. I was like, I'm in very dark waters. Everything, there's turmoil around me. I don't know what I'm going to do. The future looks very dark. I feel lost. I don't know what I'm going to do. And it's a serious situation. And here she is, this beacon of light and hope guiding people. So I started praying to her a great deal, asking for her guidance, asking for wisdom, asking her for, what do I do? And then I decided to found this media nonprofit. I named it after her. It's under her patronage and protection. But that's really the backstory to Stella Maris.
I
And I'm
figured
hoping to,
that's very beautiful.
and I, and also it's kind of the mission of what I try to do at Stella Maris is try to bring this light, this hope into a very dark and confused world full of turmoil and strife and bring the light of Christ, this hope into this world.
Well, well, Christine, let me tell you, because I'm in daily communication with the Christians in Gaza. I'm in daily communication with the Christians in West Bank and, of course, in
Wonderful.
Nigeria. And so your show meant a lot to them. So you were their
Oh,
star.
they watched it?
Yes, of course. I sent it to
Amazing. I
everyone.
did not know that.
Yeah, I
Wow.
sent it to everyone. And, we are in direct contact with Cardinal Pizzabala's staff
Wow.
and with direct
Wow.
contact with the church, daily with the church. We just had a great call with Cardinal Pizzabala's director of Gaza. And you're a light to them. And you have to know that, and they're literally a church in rubble, under rubble, in
Yeah. Yeah.
flooded, toxic, cold muck,
Yeah.
and it's dark. And so it means the world to them to see someone like you stand with them. So I really, really thank you for that, Christine Niles. Now I have to
Thank
land this
you.
plane, and my assistant, she
Okay.
probably start crawling. She's trying to
Okay.
sneak by because there's tasks that she needs to get done for me. And she's like,
Okay.
this show's longer than we said. But Christine, I could interview you every week. So we're always here for you if you have any big projects. Any
Well,
new
you'll be on my show next. I'll get in touch with you soon.
Okay, and I can't wait to tell you about our movie in France, and maybe you can come with your family.
I
Maybe
can't
you can
wait.
do a pilgrimage. You're gonna love this movie.
I can't wait. And God bless you. God bless you for all the work you're doing there. Seriously, God bless you. What you're doing is a true light and beacon to them. So again, God bless you and VPP. And I hope everybody donates to you guys.
Well, I hope they do too, but I hope you all donate to Christine because I cost your donors. I didn't.
Thank you.
You did. VPP, we cost Christine Niles supporters. So I feel obligated that some of my donors skate over to you because I feel horrible.
Thank you.
So, all
Thank you.
right. All right. Thank you, Christine.
Okay. Thank you. God bless.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, guys. Christine Niles, you have to watch her show. I'm going to put her links in the show notes. I'm not going to do it. Rida over there is going to do it. Did you see Rida crawling? What kind of podcast? This is insane. What kind of podcast are we running here? And but also, you need to support this because it is a good, wholesome, rooted Catholic apostolate. You need to support it, and you need to share it. I know I watch. Don't watch the other two shows I mentioned. Well, you can watch Candace. Don't watch Tim Dillon. You'll hate me. I love Tim Dillon. He's really funny, but I don't give him my endorsement. Although I watch him every day. Every time he comes out with something, I watch him. But you can watch Christine Niles. You can watch it with your young people, your family, your children. Make sure you do that. I am actually going to be traveling to the Middle East. I'm not going to tell you. I can't really say all of the places I'm going through Advent and Christmas. And I can't wait to tell you about where I am. I'm going to tell you about where I am each place after I left. And what will I be doing? I'll be doing the work of the Vulnerable People Project, which is standing with the most vulnerable people in the world, telling their stories, sharing their dignity, inspiring solidarity when the world has walked away. And we can only do that with your support. So go to our website, the vulnerablepeopleproject.com. Look at what we do. People don't believe what we do. They think it's AI. I've been accused that we have AI-generated images of us delivering relief where we deliver relief. And that would be probably easier, but no, we actually do the hard work we've just ordered 140 pop-up homes for Gaza. The first 46, I believe, have already been arrived and set up. My goal is by Christmas at the latest, every Christian family in Gaza will have a pop-up home. We're also going to be launching a campaign to get them firewood. Israel will not let us bring in heating oil. But if you've seen the images on the news, it's already very cold, and it's just a flooded, freezing cold mess. And so our hope is that by Christmas, all the Christian families of Gaza will have pop-up homes and heat. And you can be a part of that by going to vulnerablepeopleproject.com and donating. All right, guys, until next time, this has been the Jason Jones Show Hungover Edition. Oh, how did I do? All right. Aloha.